Good evening. Welcome back, I should say, to Investigator News, and some just new. We're doing actually, I'm just exposing the Clintons, and so if you're new, you're getting kind of into the middle. We did a part this morning that went over the exposure of politicians. Um, and yesterday, I did a little bit of the boys on the track, what actually happened to them, because I don't want to dwell on that too much. It's very heartbreaking, and sometimes it really upsets people. So I want to move on to what we were looking at with the corruption in Arkansas. Now, if you watched this morning, you seen basically the cause of why we were so closed off and why we couldn't get uh, any of the sheriffs or police or DEA, FBI to do anything for the Linda Ives family. And it was very frustrating. And we fought for 10 years before we really got any really good answers. It wasn't until we started seeing some of the documents that we started realizing there was something else going on in Mina besides just the two boys running across maybe just some drug runners. We found out it was way bigger. And as the years went on, we found out that there was a lot bigger to it and that our own government was behind it. And then not only did we have to fight the state and locals, but then we had to go up against government and political officials. Um, so with that, I'm going to get busy with this. And I'm starting with basically Bill Clinton and him growing up. Now, I've done the Clinton corruption in the past, so you might have to go back and grab a few of those to get an idea of really what he was like and some of the corruption before they went to the governor's spot. They were full of corruption before then. Hillary with the little girl that was raped. Bill Clinton, I get this, he was, him and Hillary were both protesters. And he protested one time in a tree at college that he stayed days. He even peed on the ground. He didn't get down. And his friends would throw food up to him. That's just the kind of people these are. They're just protesters. They're anarchists. So, when they got into the White House, a lot of what they were, people around Arkansas were hearing that they calmed down a lot. So Bill Clinton, he was basically, a lot of people know he was born in Hope. And Hope is famous for the watermelons, but a lot of the times his family would spend it in Hot Springs. Now, back then in the 50s and 60s, we had a lot of mafia coming to town, and his mom spent a lot of time in Hot Springs. So, they had open gambling and the horse races. And so it was a pretty wild town. And so that's what Clinton, pretty much the atmosphere he grew up in. It's it's different than most people. It'd be like living in Vegas and with the mafia. They said the mafia, I went to the Gangster Museum, and that's where I asked a lot of questions. If maybe by chance they knew of Bill's mom, and yes, they did. She was quite a hottie, I guess. I didn't know that, and that she was always real close to the gentlemen that were maybe um, not one of the mafia guys, but one of their cronies. And so, it kind of gives you the idea that Bill Clinton was a little bit hanging out with the bad guys. Now he had a problem with lying, as according to those around him. He just couldn't never quit lying. And as we see with Hillary, she does the same thing. So both of them are just chronic liars. No one ever held it against them. But we held it against him when it got to be, uh, when he started claiming things. Um, Now he went through nationals. Um, it was like a boys' day. It was to be a delegate to the National Boys State, and he was able to meet John Kennedy. And I thought, he did that. Wow, maybe that would have gave him a little bit of ambition. But no, most people said he was pretty calm until about the time he married Hillary. And then he was more energetic, they said, than 10 people. Well, no wonder. Um, he said uh, they never seen him running. They never seen him jogging, and it was a surprise when he went to the White House and wanted a track outside. And he thought that he probably just wouldn't use it, and of course that's what we found out. But he ran for attorney general, and he was virtually unopposed, and so he took about 100% of the vote. And that basically, when he met, um, well, he was part of the Dixie Mafia, and I believe that's what sprung him into the governor's position 2 years after. And Bill's um, aversion to the truth, it makes you wonder: does it? Does he lack moral standards, or nobody knew, but everybody, that's what he said. He's a big charmer. I mean, he was. The people loved him, but it was because he told stories, and wonderful stories. And of course, he was always, um, flirting with the women. Now, the thing that started getting us, he had claimed he was a Rhodes Scholar. Well, he never completed that. And to this day, he still says he was a Rhodes Scholar, but no, that's not true. And he went to Moscow and he did business with them, and it was against the United States government. And there's a little bit on that to where he was meeting up and he became more socialist and Marxist, is where he started getting that from. Now, while he was governor, he said one of the big things during his campaign speech, he said he balanced the budget 11 times in the state. Well, he never did that. That's a lie. He said he never raised taxes. He was against raising taxes. Well, he raised taxes 126 times, and it put Arkansas into um, an inflation that just crumbled the state. Now, I had left the state by then when all of the taxes hit, but then I came back and I could see it was better. Nothing like what my friends were calling and telling me about. It was almost to the point of poverty, almost what we're looking at right now. And it wasn't until he got out of office, and it took quite a few years for the next two governors to be able to get rid of these taxes and bring it back to normal. Well, then we still had everybody he left. Because when he left and went to the White House, he took a lot of people with him, but he put so many judges and chief of police and um, district attorneys and attorney generals and the Supreme Court judges, and so many people in power. It really took us a long time to get him voted out and realize what he had done. And so, um, So basically, with when they started, he started into that. Hillary was with the Rose Law Firm, and they were making a lot of money. Um, they had invested in quite a bit here in the state. One was Palm, and that's where they met Hubble, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But see, Arkansas had a problem. They were doing so much money in cocaine, 100 million, that you create a problem of how to clean $1 million. And William, we were just talking about that of money cleaning and money laundering. And I don't really like to get into the money laundering as much because it seems like all the politicians do it. And this morning, you guys knew that all this cocaine coming in, that of course it was money laundering, and they were having to clean the drug money into clean money to be able for it to be put into a bank. And what they did is um, they banked out of Mina for most of the part, and then they threw some of it through Palm. What they would do is they would ship the money down to a bank in Florida, which later would be connected to BCCI, and and the money at the Bank of Atlanta, Georgia, which also they shipped it to Citicorp in New York. So as you can see, they also did it overseas. They had a bank in Chicago. Um, they had one that was partially owned by Dan Rosentowski and Dan Lassiter, and they would get bonds and end up becoming a broker for the bonds, and they would transfer the money back to the Rose Law Firm. So now BCCI, they did go to court over this, and I did get to watch the court hearing, and basically they pled not guilty. They said they didn't realize this was dirty money. This was a politician, and they never thought this was what they would do. They did get in trouble for it, and but it was basically turned over to the Saudis, and the Saudis took over BCCI. That's what I understand. So don't hold me on that. So now Lassiter, he was basically under investigation in himself before the Clintons had left. And it was over the drugs, but it was also over prostitution. And the clips you see and you can find online is basically that he was in the drugs with Bill Clinton's brother, Roger, and that they had caught up into some prostitution. And what they were doing is they were giving young girls as much drugs as they wanted, and eventually they became prostitutes. Well, now what I have found out is we knew of that Jeffrey Epstein and Weinstein had been here quite a few times. And now it was Weinstein that was a big celebrity because he was from Hollywood. But we did see Epstein. And it was shortly after that when we found out that Lassiter was doing prostitution with young girls and sending them out of state. Now, I never did find out if the mothers or the parents knew about these girls, but it was quite a few of them. And some of them could have even been some of the original Epstein girls. Um, that's what he kind of um, um, testified to, is that some of them went on to bigger, um, more luxurious prostitution. And the only thing I could track it to would be Epstein. Now Lassiter with the drug use, um, basically led to the arrest of him, and not only him but Roger Clinton, and both of them were put in prison. And the thing about it is Roger Clinton got out. He didn't get a long term at all, but Lassiter ended up being 6 years. But Clinton ended up pardoning him. So of course he got out, and he moved on. Now the other thing is our Arkansas State Police. Um, it was called um, Police Gate or something like that. That was there's a video after, and really all of what the state police did was they escorted him around. They were his security. But the other thing he made sure they made sure of is women. They always made sure that Bill Clinton had women. Like he would go to a rally and he'd say, "I want that one, and that one." The state troopers would go down and whisper in their ear, and he would set them up for later. He had a huge sex drive. Now, a lot of you know that he did rape quite a few women here. So he has been labeled a serial rapist here in the state. And at one point during Hillary's campaign, both of them had um, ankle bracelets on. And everybody said, "Ooh, what's the ankle bracelet?" Well, they did get in trouble for a few things here in Arkansas. And Bill, that's when he was a serial rapist. And then he ended up on house arrest. So we had Bill stuck here, but he was at the penthouse on top of the Clinton Library. So you could see there was still a lot of issues. Now, I want to go back a little bit because um, one of the first things that they did was some loans. And a lot of people get this wrong. They really do get this wrong. Is a lot of what they were doing was through Palm, Parkometer, and that was with Hubble. And everybody says no, he went somewhere else, and he got like a loan for 2 million or something dollars, and uh, it was part of a state-run program. No, that didn't happen. The way I mean, that's too easy to catch. That is way too easy for the state to catch that, and plus it was state-run. Now, what he did was, like I said, he was moving that money to all them different banks. And not only that, but then he was trying to use Parkometer. Um, and get this, it started with Hubble. And you guys remember Seth Ward? Um, that was his son-in-law. And basically, he between Hubble ended up in trouble because he worked along with Vince Foster at the Rose Law Firm. And I think this is where Vince Foster got into a little bit of trouble. And I'll do Vince Foster at a later date because that's very interesting. Um, so, so Hubble, he drafted legislation creating Act 1062, which created um, it was so that they could do loans and as well as grants. And the grants would go one way, but then it was for schooling. So all that money that came in, any of the excess, they were funneling. But what it did is it helped um, Webb Hubble get the first loan. The problem was he did it through the Rose Law Firm, and working there, and also him being basically working for the state and a state job. It was conflict of interest, so he had to leave the Rose Law Firm, and he was also um, fined for working with both. Um, he was a senior partner at the Rose Law Firm, and they said he was it was a conflict of interest with the committee at the Rose Law Firm in 1988. He was an Arkansas legislator that report governmental conflicts. And so what it basically did with him working for the state, and he ended up having to resign. And he came, what I heard, he came really close to being indicted for conflict of interest on what he was doing because the U.S. Justice Department and the and let's see if I can remember, U.S. Justice Department. Um, basically, it was a part of like a legal ethics, And so he basically got mad and quit after it kept going back and forth whether he was going to get charged or not charged. Now, there is rumors that Hillary Clinton and Hubble had an affair. And boy, I tell you, you look at Hubble and you look at Chelsea, it's just really close. But then you look at Hillary Clinton's young pictures, and she kind of looks like Hubble in a way. So I don't know. Uh, who knows? It will. Well, who knows? We'll never know because I know Hillary isn't going to tell us. Um, Now, the other thing was um, the Parker meter loans. What they found out was actually building to, um, they got that loan so that the Rose Law Firm could build the nose cones for the planes. And then they would have someone make them and then they'd ship them to the airport, and the airport would, the pilots would install them into the planes. And it was actually, they said, smuggling dope. Now, the other thing that's really scary is we started seeing laser blink, laser beams coming out of Cessnas, and it was a weapon. And they tried that for a little bit, and then Hillary was managed to sell it to the military. So she made money with this laser beam. I don't know who created it. I just know that it was through the Rose Law Firm that this happened. The other thing was um, about the time they got into further into um, right about the time I left. That was in '86. Their drugs increased hugely, but what we started seeing was now I knew about Whitewater a little bit, but we started seeing an influx of a lot of people from China, a lot of businesses, and what we found out was they had sold nuclear. It wasn't weapons; it was just how to make them to China. And in turn, they had given up some property here. Uh, Now, it wasn't Whitewater because Whitewater's when they ripped off the old people on prime loan scams. This was a little bit different. So we started seeing a lot of Chinese. What another thing we started seeing was a huge influx of refugees. We didn't understand that one either. And then what we were looking at was that um, when they left, we had thought that the drug trade was over. Well, lo and behold, we found out they moved it. Uh, they moved the airstrip north, and then they added two more um, that would be west of it, east of it, and one went to the north, one went to the south, and they were like snuggled into little in between people's farmlands. And now nobody ever traced it back to them owning any of that farmland. They just traced it back to these strips. And it would only be, and it was only for them to drop the drugs. It wasn't for them to land. See, that's where a lot of people go, oh, they couldn't have been done that. That was grass. They don't, that's not an airstrip. No, it was to drop the drugs, not to land. They used Mina as the landing, or they would go into, they would either go north into Chicago or Louisiana. It just depended because they were dropping them for quite a few states. So, um, the operations of MENA with Governor Bill Clinton and Barry Seal had. We hear that Clinton had even bought a bunch of planes for him because of the nose cones. It was more Cessnas, and what Bill bought him was the doors that open sideways, and that's something that he got for them. And those are illegal. Remember, I said this morning, and if you didn't watch, you can go back and watch. Uh, that was illegal by the FAA. You weren't supposed to have that. But Bill made sure those doors were on all the planes. So that was something he did. And every time it was like there was attempting for Barry Seal to go to Louisiana, but it always seemed like after Bill and George Bush would talk to Seal, that he would stay right here. Well, as it got bigger, then we became basically the hub for all the drugs in um, the states. And it even started towards, I'm going to say close to 2000, where we started seeing it was almost globally. Millions of dollars pour into the states still. And can we find where they're at? No, because it's controlled by the Democrat Party. Every time we think we find an airstrip or an airport, it closes down. And what's really weird, I had one here in Conway, and it was pretty tiny. And it started getting busy for a little bit. And then we heard that it was raided by the FBI, and then it just disappeared. And now they have a bigger road and shopping centers there. So we never did find out. When things like that happen in Arkansas, it mums the word. The media will not talk about it. Uh, you know, so it was really sad because we got to be known that we had the sleazy governor that was full of cocaine, and everyone knew it. Um, Now the other thing is Charlene Wilson. Now she was the prostitute that met Roger and Bill Clinton at a restaurant called the Bistros. And where she came in is she was bringing girls to parties. She had drugs. She was a prostitute. She doesn't not admit it, but she was one of the key witnesses against not only Roger Clinton but Lassiter and Bill Clinton. And what it was with Bill Clinton, it was his cronies. And the night that the boys were put on the tracks, Charlene Wilson was there. And so she gave her account. Well, they basically started inviting her to the governor's mansion to bring some girls, but they wanted them young. Now, Charlene Wilson said she never did the young girls. And when they knew that, then Lassiter would automatically show up with 14, 15, 14, 15-year olds. And so they had big parties. And she said they had like toga parties and lots of cocaine. She said the one thing, Hillary was never there. Hillary was always on the other side of the mansion um, and mad at Bill for having the parties. Um, Now, the other thing was um, we had to really look at there was a physician that came forward and had admitted after the Clintons had left and he felt comfortable enough to talk about it that Bill Clinton overdosed 2 times when he was here as governor and once when he was at the White House. And they basically said his sinuses and his sinus passages were destroyed and that he could no longer snort his cocaine. Now, the rumor or the doctor said that basically he was seeing tracks on his arms, and that means he was injecting the drugs. And he said that he said 2 occasions that were put on record. The one for the White House never would make it on the record. Now, he also mentioned that he was the one that Bill called when he needed his vitamins the first week at the White House. He was having issues and called this physician and said he needed his vitamins. Um, so, um, um, and what had happened is he ended up at Lassiter got a hold of one of the cronies from here that, and it was basically a state trooper, ex-state trooper, that went ahead and was taking cocaine up to the White House at least once a month that we know of. And now the other thing I wanted to get out of the way was we all heard Fahmy Malik's story yesterday. And I told you I would tell you why Bill Clinton used him. Uh, Now, see, Bill Clinton's mom was an anesthesiologist, and she worked at one of the hospitals down around Hot Springs. And it's a good sized hospital, and she did very well. Well, on two occasions there, when she got a little older, she overdosed a patient. And so basically, when it went to the coroner, um, Bill didn't want his mom to get in trouble, nor did he want this murder to taint his political career. So Fahmy Malik basically covered it up. Well, then there was a second one that happened. And so, of course, he covered that one up too. So Bill owed him. So when it came to the boys, it's logical that that's what happened. And that's even, I discussed it a little bit with Linda Ives, and she said, once we found that story out and we found the documents on it, she said it was almost like Ozzy's. And she goes, what can you do on that? His mom's dead, Fahmy Malik's dead. There's nothing we could do about it now because they blackened all the pages so bad we didn't see nothing till a few years ago. And Malik died, I think, about 5 years ago. So there's nothing we could do. Um, it was just a bad autopsy. And who do we charge for that now? And see, that's what's going on with a lot of this that happens in Arkansas is the Clintons are real good at statute of limitations. And every time we went after them, statute of limitations hit. Now, Karen, I see, is saying he's a junkie. Well, one thing we did notice is Hillary wore the cutest little dresses when she was here. It was all about the poofy little sleeves and short. When she left, I don't know if it was here. None of us can really decide if it was here or if it was when she went to Washington that she started wearing long sleeves. Now we heard from one of the aides that she has tracks. Can we prove it? No. I could just tell you that we heard that she did, but I mean, a woman that wears pantsuits and a jacket in 100-degree weather and will not take her coat off, she's hiding something. She's hiding something. And that's what we feel. I mean, we joke about it here. Yeah, look at her. She's sweating and she's going to fall out. When that day they were hauling her to the Suburban and she could barely walk, I think she was overheated. It was like 90 that day, and she was in a suit, long sleeves. I think the weather got to her. Now her little jerky movements. Well, when we looked into that cocaine, that's one of the side effects, but also extreme rage. And we know she had extreme rage. Now, to find out anybody that will admit to this is what was going on with her and him, we can't. Because if you talk, you're gone. That's just it with the Clintons. If you talk, you're gone. You're done for. So people either they brave it out and they say stuff, or they just keep their mouth shut. And that was like with the McDougalls. Susan McDougal kept her mouth shut, and Mr. McDougal ended up in prison over the Whitewater scam, and he ended up dead. The big thing here in Arkansas is don't go to prison. You go to prison, you're done for. And that's one of the big things that has been known, even amongst Bill's own lawyers. They refuse to go to prison. They'd rather die because they know what's going to happen. And so, is that what happened to Epstein? We don't know. We really don't know. So, nobody will ever know. So, now I want to get on with a little bit on the boys. Now, 2.5 years after the incident on the boys, that's, you see how long nothing had been really done. And then Gene Duffy was asked to head up the newly created Drug Task Force job, and they would require her to investigate drug trafficking um, in 3 counties in the area of Arkansas, including Saline. However, on the day she was appointed, her boss, prosecutor Gary Parlin, gave her a particular command. She went into the office. She was told to lock the door. She stood in front of the desk, and he looked right at her and told her not to use the drug task force to investigate any public official, and basically kicked her out of the office. So no politicians in Arkansas were to be looked at by the drug task force. Um, and they did this to all of them, even the ones before her. If they would threaten them, and then when they would start looking into drugs, they would find out Mina had it going on. They would start investigating it, and they were fired. So Gene Duffy stepping in um, was almost a blessing to us, because when she was done with them, she started working for Linda Ives. And um, they um, she had a big team. It was like 6 or 9. I might run across it, but she had quite a few, and they started looking into it, and they found out, okay, there's drugs in Mina, but living here, you know about that. And so she knew to leave it alone. So she just exclusively started working on the boys' case. And so she talked with Charlene Wilson, and meantime, keeping that whole Mina thing in the back of her mind, wondering, it's gone on for since 1977, and nobody's allowed to look into it. And she didn't connect the two between the boys and this uh, this drug running. And by then, the cartel was in on it. And you remember me talking about 19, uh, we're talking um, 88, 89. And that's when I was telling you that the politicians were now a big part of this, and they were covering it all up. Now, Gary Arnold, he basically, all of the information uh, in her reports went to Arnold. And she was basically disobeying his orders, and because of the corruption that was going on in the state. It wasn't just the drug running, it was the corruption that was rising in our state. And she found out some new information. And so she decided she was going to start looking into it. Well, um, basically, the U.S. Attorney, Bob, I think Govar, um, he showed up and he told her, no, 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 no looking into that. You can look into the boys. And then he was even starting to, a few days later, saying, well, you don't need to worry about the boys. It's an old case. It's, why don't we close it? It's a cold case. Let's just, we just don't, we think it's suicide. And so she really that didn't sit with her well. And so, um, so she ended up having to talk with U.S. Attorney Chuck Banks. He's a federal organized crime drug enforcement task force. Well, he was looking into her net, trying to find out what she knew, and wanting to know what links that she had found. And he had already developed substantial information linking public officials to drug activities. And of course, Gene Duffy task force was operational, and he started telling her about this. And she, at this point, you just don't trust people. Nobody that's above you in the police world, criminal, DEA, FBI. At this point, we didn't trust them. I mean, because look at how they had lied and covered up and told us no. And then they told other investigators, don't look into politicians. And it just really seemed like she wasn't going to get anywhere. And since the boys had passed away, um, they had no way of knowing that her drug task force, um, when he came to visit her and was confiding in her, she didn't realize he was there to shut her down. And so, nearly solving Kevin and Don's murders, it didn't occur to her that the drug task force would be shut down over the boys. And this is what she had found out. And not only that, they reopened the case on the boys briefly, enough to give her just that little bit to go after, and then they shut her down. And what they ended up doing is, and I don't want to get too involved in all the stuff that was going on with Jean Duffy, but her investigators had then found out that there was a good possibility that three individuals were part of this. And that was Campbell, Lane, and boy, what time for me to forget. So, and Harmon. Now, Harmon, they knew was a serious drug addict. He was getting arrested, even as working for the state. He was getting arrested for cocaine, and he just couldn't keep himself out of trouble. Now, the thing about it was Harmon and Garrett sat on her couch, on Linda Ives' couch, and consoled her over the boys. And, Harmon and Garrett were sincerely, she thought, trying to solve her son's murder. And now they might be part of it. I mean, that's something she really had to wrap her head around. Now, she knew this stuff with Clinton was going on, but for their own police department to be that corrupt and try to orchestrate covering it up, she said that really struck her odd. And Linda Ives said at that point she didn't know really what to do. Do you go to another city? Do you go to get away from the sheriffs, go to the police? Do you go to um, the DA? And so that's what she did. She went to the DA. And come to find out, the DA just really was all standoffish with her and really didn't want to prosecute the case. They wanted to look into it. And so the more they looked into it, the more they started um, uh, not telling her. They stopped calling her. And in her frustration, she basically started going to the FBI and saying something is going on. Now, when it went to the grand jury, um, and the judge Cole stopped it. Now, this is a Clinton judge. So when they had got this to the grand jury and they gave all of what was going on, and it was the hint that the police department might have something to do with it, the grand jury was willing to push this forward. But when they decided that there was those three that could be involved in it, one was the DA that was for that case. Um, and one of the investigators for the DA was one of the other guys. So the judge basically said, nope, we got to throw it out. Well, he refused to bring it back into his courtroom after that. And come to find out, this judge was really good friends with the Clintons. Um, and so, here she was again, looking for, maybe can we move it to another judge? I mean, anything that what you would think as a parent of what you would do at this point. You're hearing that the police that's investigating the case might be the ones that actually killed your son. And so then all the kids around him, the boys on that night, start coming up dead. And it ended up every single one of them. But then Linda Ives had got a call in 93, I believe it was, from the last living kid. And he told her, and I'll get to it on probably on another show, but he came forward and gave her info about that he knew that Harmon was on the track that day and that night. And he knew because Harmon dated his mom. And he placed him and Kirk Lane and Campbell on the tracks that night. And so, but this was many, many years later. But at this point in time, um, basically there was um, when it started breaking out that there could be cops that were in the middle of this, the media was shut down. And of course, it was done by um, Governor Clinton. And so he owned the media here, folks. He most of the judges from Little Rock all the way to Hot Springs, any of the major cities, probably even up here in Conway. But if it was a major city, he put all those judges in line. He put the DAs, um, he put in not only that, but he was even putting in school officials, which we didn't understand that. And they were doing something about the books, the school books. They wanted to either keep them and make the kids learn out of 1950s books, or it was to get a really radical school book. And so that was something that was being proposed back then. I think is kind of weird now that it's CRT. But he had the media bought out. And so they would write anything. Whatever he told them to write, they wrote. And so um, there was a Linda Holenbeck. She was a reporter and she was part of the Arkansas Democrat here. And they would they would write about anything that he said. And and they would almost go around and intimidate others to basically do what you said, you're being told to. And so they did that for a very long time. So not only were our newspapers and our media, and there was a good reason for it, because when they went to the White House, they called a blackout, news blackout in Arkansas. Um, so they stopped us from even for the reporters that really wanted to say anything, up to anybody that wanted to talk. And basically, with a media blackout, if you even call another network, they're being told not to talk to you. And so I didn't do that. I called Rush Limbaugh. So, we all did that. We all went our own little ways and called whatever conservative media would listen to us. And so there was um, what they did at the same time is then it was let's crush Jean Duffy. Um, and what had happened is when her investigators came back with the information on that it was the police, she went to her uh, the people above her. Now she is DEA, so she was DEA investigator. And when she went to those above her, they basically shut her down. They said, nope, you're not going to do it. All of a sudden, there were over 200 newspaper articles crucifying her, saying how horrible and she wasn't a good cop, and saying she was stealing federal funds. She was stealing stuff out of the holding the safes that kept all the drugs. They said there was drugs missing, there was money missing, everything they could do to destroy her credibility. And that was all because she found out about Harmon and Kirk Lane. And so the media would basically that crucified her here basically she ended up being run out of town. And there was really nothing she could do about this. She just had to leave. They started having weird people show up at her house, or weird people calling to threaten her. Um, Teenagers coming by and um, vandalizing her stuff. People that were, or teenagers that would come and stare at her house, threaten her kids on the way home. So, in order to be safe, she went ahead and left and went to Texas until everything kind of calmed down. So, it worked. It worked. They intimidated her and they got rid of her. Now, the thing is, they had to have someone to cover for her spot. Well, they brought in this next guy. And when the next guy came in, well, of course, you know what happened the first day. He was called into the office and he's told he's not to look into any political careers, or political corruptions, political anything that had to do with the drug task force, anything that had to do with Mena, Arkansas, anything that had to do, especially with two boys that died on the tracks. So this new guy gets, a couple of Gene's guys, investigators, plus he gets his own. Well, of course, they're talking, and he started hearing that even the head of the task force where they were working was even part of what happened to the boys on the tracks. So we are thinking even he was out there. So now, basically, um, we're looking at U.S. Attorney Chuck Banks. Now, there was a holdup for several weeks about looking into what was really going on up in Mena. And, get this, folks. The thing with Mena is over by, it's almost into Oklahoma. Now, where the boys were killed was almost to Little Rock. So don't think the boys were killed in Mena. That's a big mistake everybody has. No, it's because the plane left from Mena and it was dropping the drugs closer to Little Rock. And so that's where the boys were that night. So it was not up around Mena. Um, so basically, after the bad press from Gene Duffy, now this new guy was getting hit with, you're not going to look into it. Well, basically, at that point, 7 undercover officers basically walked away from their jobs. They'd had enough. They were tired. They resigned and said they were tired of looking at the corruption in the state, and what's wrong with just trying to solve a mystery of two boys that ended up dead on the track. So um, when Jean Duffy was working, she happened to started seeing some notes, and it was right around Dan Harmon getting convicted for a drug felony. Also, she had heard about Roger Clinton that was in jail. Well, she found a note in one of the case files, and she said it just looked odd, almost like it was connected to her case. So she called in Charlene Wilson, and Charlene Wilson had a nice long story to tell, and she told her about the night on the tracks. And so, voila, here Jean's got something. Um, and she was very reliable, they said. And then she started bringing up the names of the people that were on the tracks that day. And not only that, but she even knew about some of the trafficking from her, who she was dating. I believe it was Harmon. That this was all part of, it wasn't just simple trafficking, it was trafficking for the politicians in Washington that were working with the cartel. And so he's even mentioned this, because you remember this morning I mentioned to all of you that the trafficking, it ended up being part of the cartel part of it too. And it was basically what Gene was being told, and some of the other ones here in Arkansas, is that border had never get a wall. That border had better stay open via basically the cartel, because that was the money. And their fear was, even if most of the wall was up, that would cost them a loss of revenue. So now, if you think on that now, folks, look at what Trump did. And I haven't heard nothing, and I'm really trying to put my ear to the ground here on, did that stunt the cartel? Probably. I'm dumb for thinking that way. But if it did, do they owe the cartel, and that's why they're opening up our borders? Now, the other thing that's been mentioned here, and this comes from some of um, the illegals coming into Arkansas. Well, they're chitter chattering, and what they're chitter chattering over is the fentanyl that's being brought up. And basically, they say that's part of that cartel and that government cover up stuff that they do. Well, you can't get too much out of them because they don't really speak the language. But what we're seeing is that the reason they want this border open is because it's the same reason for the cocaine and everything else. The politicians are making sure that fentanyl gets up here. I mean, did you all think about that one? Who's trafficking? We always thought, okay, China send it over, Mexico's doing it, but did we absolutely think, or even try to even wrap our minds that the same politicians I told you about this morning were just making sure the fentanyl got up here? And like the heroin and the cocaine and the pot and everything else. It makes a lot of sense that this is why they are dying to keep that border open, because it's that drug trafficking, and that's their money. How does Maxine Waters go from 38,000 a year to making 900,000 at the end of the year? Wow. I would like that kind of pay raise. But so that's what we were thinking. And so now, when Charlene testified before the grand jury, um, that is what made the grand jury believe that these officers had done this, or the police department was a part of it, or some of the detectives. So, so that was good. So really, Gene Duffy really did believe the Charlene Wilson, and and not only that, but even three of the jurors basically had went up and told Linda Ives' family, we were coming back. We were going to go after these guys. We were going to let you guys do this. And not only that, but they were suggesting Family Malik be put on the stand. So see, they were all starting to uncover it, and this is something the Democrats, they can't have this. They could not let this go. They couldn't let it go to court. So can you see where? Um, and I said to someone today, they said, the boys in tract was so big. No, it was actually very little, folks, because of with what we've seen with Barry Seal and these politicians, and trying so hard to cover this up. And now we're going, here are two boys that's fixing after 1988, where they had them hearings where they just got through covering it up. Now they're looking at two boys that's killed in Arkansas. That also links back to the trafficking. Basically, they couldn't let the boys live. They couldn't let the boys live because the boys had seen too much. What did they see? We're thinking a lot more than just drugs being dropped. We think there was a lot more to this. So the Democrats couldn't let these boys live. Um, so I can't say that I want to take it down to just a little part of this. What it was is it stopped. The Democrats had to stop it because what would happen if we all found out about that? So of course they had to be silenced, and so then they thinking, okay, we made it look like an accident. Here we go, the boys, and here comes Jean Duffy, and quite a few others that were just like her, the one before her, and the DEA investigator behind her, plus at least 14 of their investigators. And so they're all looking into it. And here it comes again. And I could just see the panic on Schumer and Pelosi and uh, um, the Bush family. Now, get this, right about the time they found out that um, they were now getting a hold of brand new documents, about 9,000 documents. And it was stuff that really they had blackened, the whole page blackened. Well, they had unclassified it. The marks came off, and it was the first time we actually got to see some info. And what was in it blew us away of everything that we were finding out about the politicians, who was who. And you know what's really weird? It was the day before the Papa Bush's funeral, and then all those notes were passed out. It was what we thought when we seen it. It was like, yes, we know the politicians are behind it. Wait till they find out. And then the following day, what are they doing? They're all passing them notes out, and they're all looking scared. We think that's what it is. We really do think that that's what those notes were all about, is they found out we got that first round. Well, there were still 12,000 being withheld. And so, we're saying, okay, can we have the other 12? No, no, we couldn't. They were classified. And it's like, okay, well, now we know a lot of what happened and why Mina was the big drug trafficking hub of the United States, and at that point around the world. And this is just a few years ago on that. Um, and if it wasn't for um, um Jeremiah Films and Carnage on Ice, they do a really good job about putting these together. And Karen will tell you, those are the ones we watched. And the last time I did the show on this is I brought in a lot of those details. I want to make that for next time. But the thing is when Gene Duffy started talking to the witnesses, now we had the boys that were on the tracks, all of their little friends were killed. Okay. And then anybody that knew these boys or anybody these boys talked to were killed. Well, now Jean Duffy was going out and she was talking to some more witnesses. Well, every single one of them had been killed. So Jean Duffy felt kind of bad because every time we really get out and we talk to people, they end up dead. And really, people say, well, what kind of drugs and how much drugs? Well, put it this way, they were making almost 1 million to 30 million a day. The Clintons were scraping up, and then they had the nerve when they got to Washington saying, we left Arkansas governors broke. And then they said the same thing when they left Washington. We left Washington broke. No, they were zillionaires from all this drug money. And, as long as they keep it going here as a hub, Arkansas won't never change. We can't get rid of it. We got rid of all the people, all the corruption, all but now we mentioned Kirk Lane and Harmon. Well, here we go. I'll let you guys while I'm finishing up. Now, hopefully the music ain't loud. To give you an idea of what these people look like, now we're looking at Harmon. He has been in and out of prison so many times that Last time I seen him, he's like 70 years old, and he's like, "Oh, boo-hoo, I just got busted for the umpteenth time for doing cocaine." What are seven? Well, I can't see what are 70-year-olds doing cocaine at that age on. But not only that, but then now Lane, Kirk Lane kept us from getting anywhere. Well, he's the drug czar, I believe, or Campbell is. And now we have Kirk's Lane nephew that is the keeper of the evidence. So we thought when Kirk Lane had left, we were looking at, yeah, okay, we can get our little mitts on these, um, on the evidence. Well, he put his nephew in charge, and his nephew, when he opened the box, there's nothing left. There's no shoe, there's no socks, there's no tarp, there's no guns, there's no, all the fingerprints have disappeared. It's so disheartening for Linda, because now we've got the documents. The thing is there has been at least another 30,000 in documents that have now been dumped. And what we have found in it is just mind-blowing. It even goes further that even from 2016 on, there's more info about the boys. Now, there's Jean Duffy right there on your screen, and she is the one that has worked miracles in this case. And it is, when she pulled out all the info and she gave it to not only the guy that runs Jeremiah Films and Carnage on Ice, the clip that they all put together to figure this out on who did what and where they were and why is amazing. And so really for next time, that's what I kind of want to do. And it gives me a full hour to show you guys exactly what these men did. And it wasn't just a few cops. There was about 8 of them on the tracks that night to cover this up. And then we had our very own Asa Hutchinson. There he is right there. Even step in and has been keeping us from getting more of the documents that we can have here. We think this is what we think. We had the Department of Justice's plane land here, and Sessions showed up a couple of years ago. There's the plane. And what it did was they loaded up so many boxes. They went to the Rose Law Firm, they went to Cersei, they went to the Clinton Library and another storage facility, and they took everything on those planes. And I thought maybe, well, you guys might get a kick out of the hearse there. You might have to rewind it and take a look at it. But when we tried to find out what was in it, they wouldn't tell us. When we wanted to hunt it down to Washington, it's disappeared. Everything on that plane has disappeared. That's more evidence that we didn't even know about that now we have to hunt down. Yeah, I bet he was talking about me. No, I don't know. I've called Hutchinson's office, William, many, many times. And I basically called him a chicken the last time I called him. So maybe he's talking about me. I don't know. So next time, look how small Mena is. Look how little tiny that is. That's why I said it's a little itty bitty town in Mena where nobody really goes. But anyway, next time, folks, when I come in, I want to show you exactly how they killed the boys. And why is that important? Because it puts all them people responsible. Because, not all of the men that night that showed up had anything to do with the boys. It's just a few. And we still have time left that we can do this. And you say, the one big question everybody always asks me, well, if it's Harmon and Lane and Campbell, where do the Clintons fit in? Well, the Clintons basically, they say no witnesses. And for something this big, it's been rumored. Now, Karen, Billy Jack Hayes, we had to dump him. We found out he lied to us. So, but we do have heard from a few witnesses that Hillary did call for the death of the boys. And there's no statute of limitations on this. If we can't, Linda Ives said, if we can't get the Clintons, maybe we can get the actual men that killed these boys. And that's what we're working on. If we can take the Clintons down, we're going to. But I think it's much bigger than that. If we got to take the guys down that did the murders, we got to take Hillary down for calling for them to murder them. Then we still have to go after the politicians for trafficking drugs in our state. That's illegal. Not to mention Bill Clinton doing cocaine and Hillary. You cannot run for office. You cannot be a politician. It's against the law. And so he was doing cocaine the whole time he was governor and the whole time as president, and still, as far as we know, still doing it. The statute of limitations will never count against politicians. Well, William, we might have to talk about that. And you guys seen Kerry on there for a second. He has been the biggest one, the biggest thorn in our sides of trying to get somewhere to stop the drug trafficking. Not only that, but then we had Epstein here. And now we're starting to hear that Arkansas not only is the biggest hub for drugs trafficking, but the biggest hub for child trafficking and human trafficking. When are they going to stop using Arkansas to basically you abuse us and our state? So, anyway, I hope you guys liked that video. I'm going to add more to it. Did you guys see how young Pelosi was? Wow, she was young. And she's the biggest thorn in my side because she's been one of the ones with Kerry and Schumer that have blocked us every step of the way of getting anything into Washington. It's almost like, we go up there and they just slam the door in our faces. And, there's nothing we can do about it. As long as they keep pushing that they need that money and they need the drugs and the traffickers going on here, we're not going to get nothing done. And it's going to take, I guess, voting them out of office. Because me and a few old timers sat and talked about it the other day. And they said, the only way really to stop all this is to get these politicians out. I said, yeah, but then they'll be retired and running drugs. And he said, no, wait a minute. It would be much easier if they were out of power to get them than when they are in power. Because it being a politician, they have the power to block everything you have. Not being in power, those other politicians just might talk and stomp on them. So, does anybody have any questions about tonight? I know I just briefly touched on everything, but the big one is next week again. I know I did unload a lot of info this morning. One of the biggest things I have to say is when it comes to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, because Feinstein isn't really there, they have got to be the two biggest ones, I've seen down in cartel land that we are finding out that it's payment. It's a payment. They want to find out how much more they want, or they're trying to rub the elbows with them to work something out with them. We don't know. But we know that they're having meetings with them and secret meetings. You know, when they go behind closed doors and we don't get to hear, and they're doing it with cartel. I think it was called the Medellin and they ended up being Sonoa. And we have Escobar, not only that, but El Chapo and quite a few of them. Now, get this, every time the cartel's head guys were arrested, they started talking and they all end up dead. Or if not, then they ended up convicted and dead. But we have found out that every single one of the heads of the cartels has basically narked out the United States and our politicians for helping them to run the drugs into our state. And now they're barking about that we've got the biggest human trafficking in the United States and all over the world. And I hope, I'm hoping it ain't out of Arkansas, but that's what we're hearing. So, with that, I hope you guys really did the Powell Doctrine was righteous. I didn't think about looking over you guys. Colin Powell, I just know, I mentioned those ones this morning. I think it was Poindexter and Seacourt was the other one. I didn't hear about none of the other ones. I just heard of these few because you believe me, I was looking. I was like, oh, no, 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 no. But then we see Powell kind of oddly to the side. But, we see these generals right now, but these guys were admirals. We see generals right now that are taking the split. And this is something that we did discuss, was we see generals that are sticking by the sides of the Democrats, and then we see some that are just kind of, they're not too sure. And, we can't depend on that. Because some of the stuff that we are looking for is, we heard there's documents at the Pentagon. We got documents all over the place because of this. Whoever looked into the drug trafficking, for some reason, has more records and more files and more disclosures about the boys. And it shouldn't be this big. It shouldn't be this big. So, with that, folks, I'm going to go ahead and let you all go. And I'm going to, if I can do one sooner, because I really want to get this going with you guys. But if not, it will definitely be next week. And I'm going to try to do the next one because it's very important, because I want to get into what we have revealed recently. And it's all the new stuff, all the private stuff that I got sent. And it has to do with the revelations of what they have been finding out with Hillary Clinton and these boys. So come on back. If not, it might be next week, but come on back and just keep watching us. I'll always be talking about the boys. And if you have a question you want to ask about this that you may not have seen on the show, but you're curious about, put it down in the comments and I'll definitely answer it. But we need to do something as viewers, and not about the boys. We need to do something about these politicians in Washington that think they can smuggle the drugs. Not only that, but to traffic, use our country as drug trafficking, and then making all that money. And, we're the bad guys. We're the white supremacists and we're the terrorists. But look at what they're doing. They're drug trafficking. They're human trafficking. And we need to do something about this, because it'll only get worse. It's only getting bigger. The more the years go by, the more countries are coming up with, they have drugs too. and China has drugs, and it's fentanyl, and it's getting into our country. So, all right, folks. You guys have a wonderful Friday night. We'll see you back here tomorrow for some trivia. And always share this. Um, I tried to get out as much info tonight as I could, but it had to be a little bit on the boys and what Gene Duffy had done and what we knew about Bill Clinton and his mom. So now I gave you the reason why Fahmy Malak did what he did. And he went on to retiring and living in a beautiful home in Florida, making lots of money. So I don't know what happened to Jocelyn Elders. Now, get this, her son during this time, he was stuck on crack too. All of these kids are stuck on crack. Look at Joe Biden. Look at his son. He's stuck on crack. All those drugs came through for them, and all they ended up with was their kids as addicts. So yeah, definitely like and hit the share and subscribe. Hit that bell so you'll keep getting it. And Miss Linda, the one that has a problem with the which show, just go to the one that has everybody in it. If you go into one, you don't see anybody yakking, just go to the other one. And the reason we're doing that is two will probably be taken. And now that we have Investigator News Network, we have a fallback so you guys can find us. If Investigator News 2 goes down, everybody knows where we're going to be. And it'll give, so you won't never lose us. And I am working to make Investigator News Network a better channel for all of us. So with that, I will see everyone tomorrow night for trivia. And of course, everybody likes playing that game. So sleep tight and maybe come up with something for us to ponder on what we can do to stop this trafficking. Now that we all know that it's our own politicians, there's got to be an answer or a solution to be able to stop them. And it's because they're all tied up with the cartels and many dictators and oligarchs. So, all right. Good night, folks. We will see you tomorrow night. And God bless.